Hello everyone and welcome back to the Armchair Sociologist. In today's lecture, we are diving into one of the most foundational areas of sociological research, research methods. And for this, I am referring Haralambos Blue Book, page chapter 14, from page number 909 onwards. Now, before I begin, if you would have seen my previous lectures, you would have observed that I am using Haralambos Orange and Blue Book as and when required for the purpose of creating a foundation in the subject so that people who are attempting civil service examination, either UPSC or state level civil service examination, would find it very useful to create a base, a foundation in sociology. And today's lecture is in continuation with that, especially with the research methodology series which is going on. So today we will explore how sociologists choose their research methods, the difference between the primary and secondary data, and the crucial concepts of reliability and validity. It's very important. These are the two pillars that determine how trustworthy and meaningful our research really is. Now, by the end of this lecture, you will be able to have conceptual clarity on how reliability and validity shape sociological research and why balancing theory, practicality, and ethics is essential in choosing the right method. So let us begin. So first we will get into what is primary and secondary sources. What are primary sources? Primary sources are the data collected by researchers themselves during research. So here you generate the data firsthand, fresh data. For example, you go to a village and record the interviews on, let's say, Manrega impact. So here what you use questionnaires, interviews, participant observation. Participant observation as in where you immerse yourself in the group. Whereas, what are secondary sources? Secondary sources is the data that already exists, pre-collected by others. You reuse it. So it is faster, cheaper, but it has less control because the data has already been collected by someone else previously. So what are these data? Official statistics, media products, diaries, government reports, letters, web pages, other sociologists' work, historical and contemporary records. Now we come to how we choose a research method. So choosing the research method is influenced by the topic to be studied. Of course, because the problem will decide the tool. Second, theoretical approach. What theoretical approach are we taking? The positivists, they prefer numbers to find patterns, whereas interpretivists, they prefer meanings and lived experiences. Then third, very important, the practical considerations of funding, of time, of accessibility. Let's say quantitative preference. For example, topics like voting behavior. Now, voting behavior requires that a large number of people have to be addressed. We need a huge representativeness, a generalization. So we will be using methods like large scale surveys. And here we will use the tools like questionnaires, statistical analysis. This suits the problem. If we get into the qualitative preference, let's say topics like classroom behavior. Here we need depth, interaction. We need to observe the teacher-student dynamics. So we will go for qualitative methods. We will be using focus interviews and observation. So this is how we choose the research method. Now we come to one of the most discussed areas in sociological methodology, the debate around reliability and validity. So what is the debate? The debate is the merits of research methods. What kind of research methods are we choosing? The merits of these often focus on reliability and validity. So what does it mean? It means that every method, whether it is questionnaire, interview, observation, whichever method we use, it is finally judged by two important key questions. One question, can it be repeated? Can it be repeated to get the same results? That is the consistency aspect of it. That is reliability. And the second question is, does it give a true picture, an accurate picture of what is being studied? The accuracy part, that is the validity. In natural sciences, data can be seen to be reliable if same methods produce same results. So if there is an experiment in chemistry or in physics, it gives the same result when repeated. So therefore it is reliable in nature. Now Durkheim tried to apply this same logic to sociology, where he argued that if we use systematic data like statistics, our research too can be reliable. By replicating an experiment, one can check reliability. So in social sciences, replication means repeating a study under similar conditions to test consistency. For example, if two sociologists they conduct a survey on urban unemployment using the same questionnaire and sampling design, both get similar findings. Now this data is considered reliable. What happens with the reliable data? Generalizations is possible. So this is why reliability matters, because consistent findings allow sociologists to move from particular to general, to make broad claims about society. So Durkheim's study on suicide, for instance, used reliable statistics to generalize about social integration and suicide rates. Now we come to quantitative methods and reliability. They generally provide greater reliability. Why? Because they use standardized questions, fixed response options, and statistical techniques. Quantitative methods ensure uniformity. So every respondent answers the same question in the same format, and therefore it makes the replication to be possible. They produce standardized data in statistical form. So therefore, numbers can be easily compared and tested, which strengthens the reliability aspect. Data can be repeated and therefore leads to reliable results. The same structured questionnaire can be used again to test whether results are consistent over time or across samples. This is how retest reliability or internal consistency is often checked. And questionnaires test hypotheses designed by researcher. The positivist approach follows a deductive logic, which means from theory to hypothesis to test. Here, reliability is ensured by keeping the same research instrument and conditions constant. So, in summary, quantitative methods produce reliable results. Why? Because they use data which can be repeated and which are uniform in nature. When compared with qualitative methods, what happens? Qualitative methods and reliability. Now, qualitative methods are often criticized for failing to meet the reliability standards. Why? Because interpretivist methods or ethnographic methods, they focus more on understanding the meanings rather than producing standardized results. Because each study is unique to a specific context, here replication is of course difficult. Procedures are also unsystematic and therefore results are not easily quantified. So now here we use open-ended interviews or participant observation, and these generate rich but non-numerical data which cannot easily be coded into identical categories just like data or repeated by other researchers. Therefore, there is no way of replicating qualitative study to check reliability. For example, if two ethnographers they study the same village, they might interpret the events differently based on their own personal background or the rapport they have created with the villagers or even the timing of their study. So, but this does not mean in any way that the qualitative work is bad or inferior in nature. It simply means that qualitative methods value validity or truthfulness or the depth of the study more over reliability or consistency. So in short, reliability ensures that our findings are consistent. Findings are consistent and validity ensures that they are true, accurate. A good sociological study must have a balance of both. Of course, That means it is reliable enough to be trusted and valid enough to be meaningful. So now we have discussed the reliability validity debate, where we saw how positivists they value consistency and interpretivists they value accuracy or true picture. So let us now move ahead. There was a question in UPSC 2022 on the topic of reliability, which said, what is reliability? Explain the different tests available to social science researcher to establish reliability. So in this part, we will look at this question. What is reliability? Reliability refers to the consistency of research findings. If the same research is repeated under similar conditions and produce similar results, it is said to be reliable. So if I conduct a study today and I repeat it after a few months and I am able to get similar findings and the conditions and the results are same, then my data or my findings is supposed to be reliable in nature. Second, importance in social research. In sociology, where much of the data becomes crucial because social situations are variable. Also, respondents may interpret the questions differently. Researcher bias can also influence outcomes. In such scenario, reliability increases confidence in the accuracy and replicability of data. Now, how are we going to test to establish reliability? There are certain tests. First is test-retest reliability. Second is inter-observer or inter-rater reliability. Third is internal consistency reliability. And last is parallel forms reliability. So there are 4 forms of tests to check reliability. So we'll go one by one. First being test-retest reliability. So what it is? The same test or questionnaire is administered to the same group of people. The same test or questionnaire is administered to the same group of people at 2 different times. Now, if the results are highly correlated, the tool, our instrument, is considered reliable. So, for example, if attitudes toward national education policy remains consistent across 2 rounds of the same survey, let's say the first round was done in month of January and then we conduct a second round in month of March. Now, if the findings remain similar or consistent, it indicates test-retest reliability. Next, we come to inter-observer or inter-rater reliability. What does it do? It checks whether different researchers observing the same situation record similar findings. For example, 2 researchers coding interview transcripts from a field study on gender roles arrive at the same themes. Let's say the themes could be family conflict, work-family conflict, and patriarchal expectations. If both researchers are arriving at similar or same themes, this shows inter-observer or inter-rater reliability. Why? Because it is agreement among observers that they are coming at similar conclusions of themes. So, different researchers arriving at similar findings, observing the same situation, that is inter-observer or inter-rater reliability. Next, we come to internal consistency reliability. What it is? This ensures all items within a questionnaire measure the same underlying concept. So, suppose we create a 10 question scale on workplace stress. Now, if all questions truly belong together, in such case, the responses are correlated. If all questions truly belong together and responses are correlated, our tool is internally consistent. And last, we come to parallel forms reliability. What it is? 2 equivalent versions of a questionnaire are given to the same respondents. 2 equivalent versions. What does it mean? It means that the questionnaire is similar, just little bit wording is changed. For instance, one survey may ask, how much do you trust the government? Another one will ask, how confident are you in government decisions? So wording has been changed, but the question is actually same. So these are equivalent versions of the questionnaire. Now, if these two differently worded surveys yield similar scores, then we can say it has parallel forms reliability. So these are the four forms of test: test, retest, where we take the same test and administer to same group of people at two different times. Test, retest. Second is inter-observer, where two different researchers are observing the same situation and recording similar findings. Third, internal consistency, where we ensure that all the questions, all the items within a questionnaire measure the same underlying concept. And last, two equivalent versions of a questionnaire are given to the same respondents. If both produce similar results, then it has parallel forms reliability. Now we come to validity. What is validity? Data are valid if they provide a true picture of what is being studied. So validity is all about truthfulness. It tells us whether our research is really showing what we think it is showing. For example, if we are studying religiosity, but we only count how many times people are visiting temples, in that case, we might miss private forms of worship. So, in that case, our study would not be fully valid. A valid statement gives true measurement, description, or explanation of what it claims to study. This means that our concept which we are trying to study and our tool both should match. If we want to study poverty and our indicators, then our indicators should cover income, housing, food, education, not just one thing like income. Then only then our study becomes valid, when we are covering the concept from all sides, from all indicators. Now we come to the four types of validity. First is measurement validity. This asks, does my measure or measuring tool really measure what it claims to? For example, does IQ test really measure intelligence or just memory skills? Does church attendance measure religious beliefs or only habit? So in sociology, it is very important because we deal with ideas that are not directly visible. So our indicators, our measuring tool must truly match our concepts or constructs which we are trying to measure. Therefore, it is also called construct validity. Construct here refers to those ideas like religion, religiosity, or intelligence which we are trying to study. So it is really important to have this validity, because if our measuring tool is not able to actually measure which it claims to, in that case, even if the results are reliable, it is able to produce the same results repeated over time, it still will not be valid or accurate, because this puts a question mark on the tool itself. Whether, for example, as I said earlier, that whether the IQ test actually measure intelligence, it is putting the question mark on the test itself. So this is first measurement validity. Second is internal validity. Internal validity talks about causality. This checks whether the cause and effect link which we are trying to show is actually correct. If we say X causes Y, we must be sure that it is really X and not something else. For example, if we say that education causes empowerment, we must make sure that other factors like family income or social support or any other resource are not actually the real reason. So if our explanation, if our study rules out all other factors, then and only then our study has high internal validity. Third, we come to external validity. This asks, can our findings be applied to other people or situations? It concerns itself with whether results of a study can be generalized to other groups or situations. For example, Beverly Skeggs in 1997 studied 83 working class women in one single town in northwest England. Now, her conclusions may not fit all working class women everywhere. Therefore, this study has limited external validity. Similarly, we can say that a study of caste relations in, let's say, Bihar may not apply in Kerala. Why? Because of different context, different culture. So when we are trying to generalize the findings of one study to other groups or situations, we must check whether it has external validity, whether it can be generalized or not. Then comes ecological validity. Now this refers to the problem of how closely a research study mirrors the normal or natural setting of people's real experience. It asks, does our research setting reflect people's normal life? For example, laboratory experiments may lack ecological validity. Why? Because people act differently when they are being observed. Even questionnaires may be too remote from natural life because people tick boxes quickly or they want to give safe answers. So, these are the four types of validity given by Alan Bryman. Measurement validity, where it questions the measuring tool itself, whether it is actually measuring what it claims to. Second, whether X, second is internal validity or causality, where we say that X causes Y. Here we have to rule out all other factors which might lead to Y, and we have to confirm that it is actually and truly the X which is causing Y. In our example, it was education causing empowerment, where we ruled out any other cause. External validity, where we are trying to generalize the findings of one study to other groups and situations. And finally, ecological validity, where we are trying to see whether the setting of the research study actually mirrors the normal or the natural setting of people's real experience. Why? Because in other laboratory settings or artificial settings, people will not respond in actual or real life way in the way they are actually living. So these are the four types of validity which we must look for in our study, in our measuring tool while we are doing our research. So when we study validity with respect to quantitative versus qualitative methods, the supporters of qualitative methods argue that quantitative methods they lack validity. For example, questionnaires may produce neat quantitative data. This data could be repeatable in nature, uniform, but the procedure of filling questionnaire is far from the real everyday setting of people. So it lacks ecological validity. While filling the questionnaires, people are often in hurry and they want to just complete the questionnaire, or they want to give just safe answers. They are in a hurry. This is not how the actual life decisions are actually being made. So hence the results may look neat and clean, but they are actually not natural. Therefore, the quantitative methods are low on ecological validity. Quantitative methods lack depth to describe meanings and motives because they use imposed categories. Therefore, they also lack measurement validity. So there are already preset options which force people to choose from the boxes. For example, there are fixed labels in the questionnaire form. So if indicators don't match the real concept or construct being studied, the measurement validity suffers. As a consequence of these problems, qualitative researchers believe quantitative research may lack internal validity also. It may lead to incorrect conclusions. At the aspect of causality, if categories are wrong and context is shallow, claims like X causes Y can also be shaky in nature. So these cause effect links from surveys also could be misleading. So the supporters of the qualitative methods said that the quantitative methods lack on ecological validity, also on measurement validity, and finally on internal validity. But how they defend themselves? The qualitative researchers, especially the feminists, they use respondent validation to overcome the problems of validity. Now, what is respondent validation? This is also called member checking. After analyzing the interviews and the field notes, the researcher goes back to the participants and asks, does this represent you correctly? Does the findings represent the participants correctly? So now the respondents, they check the research findings so that they can correct any misinterpretations or inaccuracies. So this increases the truthfulness of findings even if the study can't be exactly replicated. So now just for recap, the quantitative methods are reliable, but they can miss the real life, the ecological, the real meanings, the measurement, and therefore the true causes, the internal validity aspect of it. Whereas the qualitative methods could be less repeatable, but they defend the validity via respondent validation. The participants check the researcher's interpretation whether it is correct or not. In case of any inaccuracies or misinterpretations, they can correct it. Earlier, we had seen that what are the causes which influence the choice of research method. We had seen that the research methods, the choice is influenced by the topic, the theoretical approach, and the practical considerations. The practical considerations, that is the practicality aspect of it. That is, the researchers are attracted to quantitative methods because of practicality, because of the managerial and the logistical advantages. So when we compare quantitative versus qualitative methods on this aspect of practicality, quantitative methods are less time consuming, they require less personal commitment, and they're possible to study larger and more representative samples and therefore provide an overall picture. Whereas the qualitative methods, they are confined to small numbers. They are more suited for in-depth insight and has practical limitations. They give rich understanding of how and why, but they are time heavy. Also, there are questions of access, of language issues, of transcription. So there are many limitations attached to it. Whereas quantitative methods are fast in nature, they produce generalizable results and are good for providing an overall picture, that is for purpose of macro policy. So this is also one very important aspect of practicality, that how the researchers are choosing the research method. And then comes the last, ethics. Ethics also affects the choice of method. Researchers will not use methods where confidentiality or informed consent are not possible. Researchers are responsible for protecting the participants. They are not going to use the methods which are detrimental to the participants. For example, uh, um, the research or study should not expose identities of whistleblowers. They must obtain consent, especially with respect to minors or vulnerable groups. Therefore, sociologists rarely use experimental methods or covert observation where informed consent may be difficult. So, lab manipulation or secretly spying on groups is ethically wrong. For example, we just can't covertly film a Gram Sabha, and because that would violate trust and also laws. So, ethics also affect the choice of method. So, this leads to the end of this particular lecture. We'll just go through a run through of what all things we studied. That first we studied what are the types of primary and secondary sources. We also saw that what influences the choice of research method. Then we talked about the reliability and validity debate. We also talked about the about reliability and its various types, the various tests. Then we also talked about validity, what is validity, and the four types of validity. We studied it. And also with respect to validity, we saw the comparison between the quantitative versus qualitative methods, that how the supporters of qualitative methods find the quantitative methods to lack on ecological measurement internal validity. And then we went to the topic of practicality, that how practicality and also ethics also affect the choice of method. So with this, we have completed this lecture. In the next lecture, we'll study the sampling, the probability and the non-probability types of sampling methods. Now, if this lecture helped you to understand the difference between being consistent, that is reliability aspect, and being truthful, that is a validity aspect in research, please make sure to like this lecture and share it with your fellow sociology aspirants. If you are new here, first of all, welcome. You are most welcome. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, to Armchair Sociologist, where I'm trying to make even the toughest sociology concepts and topics easy to understand step by step by using the most credible of resources, that is Haralambos Orange Book and Blue Book, and other resources like IGNOU and NCERT as and when required and relevant. Thank you for watching. Keep learning, and I will see you in the next lecture.